My name is Eddie Inman. I was saved on May the 9th, 2004 as a bus kid at Southeastern Baptist Church. I'm thankful for a pastor who loved me enough to pick me up and take me to church and to pay my way to youth camp. Because it's at Camp Victory in 2005 that I surrendered to preach. It was Teen Week 3 that last Friday night when the camp workers had honored Brother Griffiths with a sword, and he preached a sermon called Your Sword First, Sir, talking about surrender. It was that night I knew that God was calling me to preach, and since then I've been privileged to graduate from Bible college, go on multiple mission trips, to work at the camp for many years now, and work on staff at Southeastern Baptist Church. I'm so thankful that God called such a giving man to start a camp where people like me can go and surrender. Thank you, Brother Griffiths.
Thankful for Camp Victory. I thought that I was saved whenever I was 5, but I went back down to Camp Victory after working a summer and went down for Fall Frenzy, and I can't remember what Brother George was preaching that night, but it was October 8th, 2011, and I just went down for it and just knew that I wasn't saved and got things right, and so I'm thankful.
Hello, my name is Amber Dillard from Akron, Ohio, and I was saved at Camp Victory on June 16th, 2004. I was actually working as a counselor there that week, and I had already graduated from Bible college, but Christianity was just kind of something that felt good to me. It wasn't an actual lifestyle. I had never fully given my life to Christ. And we were working with a little girl there, and the counselor that was working with me, she was giving her testimony, and she read 2 Timothy 3:7. Which says, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. And when she read that verse, it hit me like a ton of bricks that, Amber, that's what you have done. You have played the part. You have looked good doing this, but you are not my child. And I knew right away what I needed to do. I went out to my car and I said, Lord, I'm so confused. And it was as though I heard him say, Amber, I'm not the author of confusion, but of peace, and you know what you need to do. So right there, in the middle of the night, in my car, on the back hills of Camp Victory, I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, and I haven't turned around and looked back since. So I want to thank Brother Griffiths and everybody who's had anything to do with Camp Victory for their time, their money, their energy, because I was a life that was changed there. Thank you.
Camp Victory because when I was 7, I thought I was saved at my church, but actually when I was 10, I went back to Camp Victory and couldn't tell you what he was preaching about, but 5 minutes into the service, just the Lord was telling me I need to get saved, so I'm really thankful that I got saved.
Hello, my name is Andy Sharpetta. I have been attending Camp Victory for most of my life, as long as I can remember. In fact, at the age of probably 7 or 8 is when I started attending with my family. And it was at the age of about 12 years old. I was at Camp Victory for a normal camp week, and I was in an evening service. I don't remember what day it was. I just remember I was in an evening service, and God started to convict my heart about my need for salvation. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. The devil was telling me I should be ashamed, that I wasn't already saved, that my parents would be embarrassed if I called out for salvation now, and the devil was just confusing me. So I walked out of that tabernacle, and all my friends were going down to the Snacker Barrel, or going to their cabins to put their Bibles away, things like that, after an evening service. And I couldn't get my mind off of this thing, and so I walked out into the dark, and I walked through the trees, and the only thing I was walking to was a flagpole, and I got to the flagpole, and at that time there was a flower box around the flagpole. I sat down on this flower box, and I started just to think about it and weigh my options. And I looked up into the sky, and I remember it was very clear, and I started to think, it's not worth risking my life for for embarrassment, for any of these things that the devil is telling me. It's not worth risking heaven and hell over. And so I got up and returned to the tabernacle, and I remember Brother Griffiths was just there dealing with a kid, and he had just gotten done, and I walked up onto the platform, and I was obviously sad, but I was composed, and he said, "What can I do for you, Andy?" And I threw myself in his arms as a young 12-year-old boy, and I said, "I'm not sure if I'm saved." And Brother George, knowing my history and knowing the home I came from, he simply said, "You know what you need to do." And so we got down on our knees there on the platform, on the back pew, and I asked Christ to come into my heart. And it was from that day on, I've never doubted my salvation. I can always recall that time as a time when I called out on God, and He heard me and saved me out of my trouble. Now, as I've grown at Camp Victory and worked there for many years, I thank God for that place and the things that He taught me there and what He's brought me through. Every dear friend that I have today, it seems, I can trace back to Camp Victory and how I met them one time there. It seems like everybody I know is from there, and God has just worked so much in my heart. Now God has called my family to be missionaries to the island of Vieques, Puerto Rico, and I say it again, most of my supporters come from Camp Victory and the friendships that I have made there, and I'll always be thankful for Camp Victory and for Brother Griffiths and him following God's leading. I pray that God's hand will always be upon that place.
My Camp Victory story starts back in 2010. My church, the Amazing Grace Baptist Temple, was planning on coming down to Camp Victory for the first time, and us as a youth group had been working for the last couple of months to raise the funds to be able to come down there. But there were some interesting things going on in my life personally. The Lord had been dealing with my heart and surrendering to preach earlier in that year, and the last thing on the face of the earth I wanted to do was to surrender and go into the ministry. And so I had been fighting the call of God for a couple of months, and the Lord was trying to wake me up by depleting my health and getting me as low as He possibly could. And during the course of that summer, we were trying to decide if I was going to be well enough to be able to go to camp. And so we made a call the day of that we were going to try to make it. And so we packed up the vans, and us and the youth group, we came down to camp a day early and stayed in a hotel. And when we woke up the next morning, my health was just too bad to try to make it to camp. And so my parents had to make the decision on what they were going to do. And so my dad loaded me up in one van and brought me back to Ohio. And my mom took the rest of the kids down to Camp Victory there on that Monday. And so now they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And they decided to call my mom's brother. His name is my Uncle Clifton, and his wife. I have a picture of them over here that I'd like to show you. This is my uncle, Uncle Clifton, and his wife Emily, and they are from Franklin, Pennsylvania. And they had said if I wasn't going to be able to make it through the week, that they would be willing to adjust their schedule and come down to camp. And many of us were trying to figure out why was everything transpiring the way that it was. And now I know that it was the divine hand of God interceding in our family's lives. Just during that week of camp, my two cousins, Zeke Hamby and also Cody Hamby, they both came to a personal knowledge of knowing the Lord as their Savior and asked Jesus Christ to come into their heart, and they both were saved during that week of camp. And my uncle was there to witness that during that week. And then also during that week of camp, the Lord started working in my uncle's life. He had been going to church, and his family, they were Christian, but they weren't completely sold out for God the way that they should be. And actually during that week of camp, my uncle actually ended up surrendering to preach. And he just finished up his correspondence, Bible college, with his pastorate's degree. And to give you an idea where his boys are at now, I have a few more pictures I'd like to show you. This is his oldest son who was saved there at Camp Victory. This is Zeke Hamby, and he just finished up his second year of Bible college and studying to go into the pastorate or evangelism. And then I have another picture here of Zeke and his brother Cody. Cody just finished his first year up of Bible college, and he has surrendered to go into the military and chaplaincy. And here this past year, Zeke and Cody were actually able to tour in a college tour group with the Massillon Baptist College and preach in a few different churches and be able to see the Lord work inside of their lives. And not only did the Lord work inside of their lives in calling those two young men to preach and my uncle to preach, but about a month later, after that, a month or two later after that week of camp, Brother Griffiths, you came up and you preached a youth rally at my home church. And on November 7th, 2010, I actually ended up surrendering to preach after you preached the sermon, Beware of Dogs. And I just wanted to thank you so much for your ministry and for your prayers, because it truly has changed lives. We love you, Brother Griffiths, and keep on keeping on.
Hi, I'm Jared Williams. My family and I have been traveling in evangelism for 8 years. We've seen a lot of fruit in our ministry. I'm sitting where I sat 15 years ago when God called me to preach at Camp Victory. Thank you so much, Brother George, for the impact you've had on my life, and my ministry, and my family. You mean so much to me.
Hi, Brother George and Miss Leah. Congratulations on the 30-year anniversary. I got saved at Camp Victory when I was 12 years old. I was at teen camp with my sister Erica and Joy Beth Brown, my pastor's daughter. And I remember it was a Wednesday morning service, and we were sitting there and Brother Ted Alexander was preaching. And he was preaching hard on hell, and I remember thinking, I wouldn't feel this way if I knew I was saved. And I remember sitting there thinking, if I go forward, my sister's not gonna, she's gonna think I'm not saved, and I didn't want her to know I wasn't saved. And I remember thinking, it doesn't matter what she thinks, it matters what God thinks. So I went forward, knowing I needed to get saved. And I remember Joy Brown came forward and she asked what I was doing up there. And I said, I don't think I'm saved. I don't remember ever getting saved. And I asked Jesus to come into my heart. And it was the best day ever. I remember after, everyone somehow heard, and everyone was hugging me. And I remember Stephen hugging me and going to the kitchen and going through the lunch line, and Sherry was working that year and she came out and hugged me. And I remember thinking how happy I was that I was saved, like all my siblings. And we all going to be in heaven one day. And I just remember how happy I was. And years went by and I ended up working at Camp Victory for a few summers. And the summer that I was 19, I hadn't been real close to the Lord. I didn't have a strong devotional life. All through my teen years it was very weak. And so when I was 19, I doubted my salvation a lot. And the last summer I worked, I forget if it was 2012, I think. And I got reassurance of my salvation one night after Brother George preached, and I came home and I got baptized again. And God's just been so good with the mercy He's shown me, and I can't thank God enough for Camp Victory and what it means in my life. And I hope one day I can share it with my children and my husband one day. And I love you, Brother George and Miss Leah, and I thank you so much for the influence you've been in my life. Congratulations on your 30-year anniversary. It's really exciting to see all the things that the camp has done for my family and my friends over the years, and to know that it's still going strong. So I worked at camp for 3 summers, but it was before that. I was saved when I was 6 years old, and I remember that clearly, but it was when I was 12 and 13. I felt God really burning my heart for mission specifically. When I was 13 years old, I believe it was teen camp, Brother Dewey Williams was preaching, and I was sitting next to Kristen Mason, and I'm sure my sisters were there as well, but I just remember her sitting right beside me, and I don't remember what Pastor Williams was preaching on, but I just remember thinking that I need to let God know that I am willing to do whatever He wants me to do, and I went forward, and I told God that I would do whatever He wanted me to do in a mission field or wherever, that I was totally giving my life over to Him, and that was the best decision I've ever made. That's how I had my salvation, and that wasn't the only time I've ever felt conviction. Of course, Brother George, you are a great preacher, and I remember so many messages that spoke to my heart, and that really kept me going. And I know it's not exaggeration at all that I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now, and I definitely wouldn't be heading the direction I am if it weren't for Camp Victory and for your ministry and for the rest of the Griffiths and everyone who's there, and Miss Leah, everyone who's given so much and sacrificed so much to be there. And I just want to thank you and say congratulations, and I love you. And that was an ugly.
Hey, Brother George, congratulations on your 30 years. Wow, seems like it's gone by so quickly. But we love you, Brother George, and Miss Leah as well. But I remember Camp Victory coming there as a very young teenager. I think back when maybe the first year after camp opened, I remember lots of people getting hurt those first years in the games that we played, and that was a blessing, and it scares me a little bit to think about that. But the biggest thing I remember in my life is the year I came there shortly after God had started working in my life, and He dealt with me one night. I remember it was August 1st, and He called me to preach. And it's through the ministry of Brother George and his faithfulness at Camp Victory there that I'm in the ministry today, and because of what he's done there, and the preaching that he has, the music, and just the camp environment is such a blessing to me. And I truly think I would not be where I am today had it not been for the influence of Brother George and Miss Sheila, and of course Miss Leah, and Camp Victory in my life. And we love you, Brother George, and hope that we get to do this again in another 30 years.
I started going to Camp Victory when I was 12 years old, and I remember the very first summer that I was there and being in the services and the Spirit of the Lord being there, and just the conviction, and I knew that I was saved, and I wanted to go forward so bad, but I couldn't get saved again. So I remember thinking, what else can I do with my life for the Lord? I'm saved, what else is there to do? And this Holy Spirit just spoke to me and convicted my heart about surrendering my life to full-time ministry. So when I was 12, I went forward and surrendered to the Lord to do whatever He wanted me to do. I didn't anticipate marrying a preacher, or I just knew that I wanted to do whatever God wanted me to do. And the Lord actually allowed me and Jeremiah to meet at Camp Victory, so that's a special place to us also because of that. But Camp Victory has a very special place in our hearts, and we're so thankful that Brother George listened to the Holy Spirit so many years ago and followed Him, and he strove to do whatever God wanted him to do, because there's so many lives, not just ours, that were affected by Camp Victory, and our kids, and still being affected through that ministry from the influence at Camp Victory that Brother George and Miss Sheila and Brother Mike and Miss Betty and Leah and all those that have worked at Camp Victory through the years have had in our lives, and we're just thankful to the Lord for it.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Perkins. I'm married to Matthew Perkins, and I have 2 children, Madeline and Joseph, and I was saved at Camp Victory. I became a worker girl in 1991, and in 1993 we were required to go to volleyball basketball camp, and it was a lot of fun, and I had a great time. Well, the services that night, Brother Mike Griffiths was preaching, and he was preaching about getting in the ship. And so after service, we were all going to the kitchen for some snacks, and I didn't have peace about my salvation, and I paced, and I couldn't sit down, and I couldn't talk to anybody. And I remember heading back to the tabernacle, and Brother John Freeman, Brother George Griffiths, and Brother Mike Griffiths were all on their faces, and they were praying for us that week, and I knew I needed to get saved. So as soon as Brother George came out, and Brother Freeman and Brother Mike, I went to Brother Mike Griffiths and I asked him if I could talk to him. And Miss Betty came and joined us, and at 10 o'clock on June 13th, 1993, I got saved and asked Jesus into my heart, and it was a wonderful day, and I've been forever changed by the ministry of Camp Victory. Brother George always says, we can have camp now, Sarah's here, but really Camp Victory is more than just, we can have camp now, Sarah's here, don't hate. It's Brother George, Miss Leah, the many people who pray, the many people who give, and the many people who love Camp Victory. So thank you, Brother George, Miss Leah, and the Griffiths family. You all mean so much to me.
Hi, Brother George. You've probably heard this before, but you've been the single biggest spiritual influence in my life. I remember getting saved in 1983 at Maranatha, and so it was probably the summer of '84 when, for the first time, I went to camp when you were still using Mountain View in Monticello. So it was great to be with the camp in the early days. When I graduated from high school, I remember it was a little bit after graduation in '88 when it was at camp that I made the decision to enter the ministry. And so I knew right away from that if you had gone to Midwestern, that's where I wanted to go, because I wanted to be like you. And so you asked me to go to the Rice Society, and that settled it for me. And you suggested I get a Schofield Reference Bible, and so I did, a brand new one. When I got married in '93, I asked you to be my best man because that was the highest honor I could think to give to someone at the time. And so after that, as all Sherry and I began having kids, you can ask her, I always kept suggesting George to be somewhere in the name, either male or female, and somehow it never actually ended up that way, but you were in the running anyway. And so although I am not wired to preach the same way as you do, you've been my favorite preacher for 30 years, and I love you. Happy 30th anniversary.
What you got in the pot?
Beans, you want some?
Yeah, I guess. Oh.
Oh. Oh no, they're dead!
But don't worry. We were saved at Camp Victory. Thank you, Uncle George. Happy 30th anniversary.